It's called How to See a Sasquatch. It's a very straightforward thing about steps you can take to see a Sasquatch. First, go to some woods near you. They can even be small woods very near town. And if you find some suspicious structures, even subtle ones, but then more elaborate ones too, if you think they may not be human, then leave an audio recorder out there and record night after night. And then if you hear knocks and vocals or tree pushes on a still night, you can pretty much put two and two together and figure that those structures are the kind of flags that Sasquatch plant in their territory. They don't live in this territory, but they circulate through this territory. And then step one is find structures. Step two is record audio and hear them. And step three is go out and sleep there by yourself so that you're not a threat because you're just one person. You have to make yourself vulnerable. So I go out there and sleep there, and I've had tree pushes 80 feet away from me, and I've had knocks, and I've had whistles, and I have not yet gotten them on film or seen them, because usually when they come close, it's really the darkest of nights, you know, because they feel more protected and as Mark Zasky says, more cozy on those nights. So they'll come in closer. But I now have 3 FLIRs, thermal cameras. And I'm going to have one with me, and then one set up like over 50 or 100 feet to my right, and one set up 50 or 100 feet to my left, and have the field of view kind of converging on those, just where I've had trees pushed, more than one tree pushed down. And, you know, hopefully because thermal doesn't emit a beam, it's an entirely passive technology where you just, you know, it just reads the heat signature passively. And so I'm hoping to get, you know, to be able to see at least through technology, if not with my naked eye. The whole point is, in this documentary, is that there are several ways to see Sasquatch. Another one is going to be this long distance photography that I'm going to feature in the documentary about, that I learned about more in Florida. And a third way is, have you heard of Snow White Bigfoot?
I've heard of it. I haven't heard. I've heard of her, but I haven't really watched the videos.
Ohio, she's been communicating with her local Sasquatch group through objects, it's like a game of chess. Like, she'll move objects and they'll move them. They'll bring whole new objects that she's never seen before that resemble the objects that she has out on her porch, and they'll put them with those objects. And she's been doing this for 5 years. And one day she went out and she filmed video behind her shoulder, backwards. She walked through her yard and she caught several of them, but one in particular quite clearly on video. So that's another way that you can see a Sasquatch. So I'm trying to make it more straightforward. I'm trying to demystify the whole effort, the whole, you know, pursuit of these. And, you know, because there's such a mystery, and it's shrouded in paranormal fog all the time. But really, it's straightforward. They come around, they're flesh and blood animals. You can take steps to have an experience with them. And if you have the right technology, you can film them. That's the point of the documentary. And I hope to release it by the end of the year, and hope that people will be able to do the same thing that I've done. Oh, what I was going to say is, so one of the main points is that they're not just out in the extreme hinterlands. They're right next to our civilization. Right. They're the yin to our yang. They're right there. And you don't have to figure out where a hot spot is and then drive 4 hours to that hot spot. You just go to your spot 2 miles away or 10 miles away from you, and you explore until you find their signs, and then you record them. Then you know that's part of their territory, part of their range. They come through, and then you can do what you want. If you're brave enough or foolish enough to go out and sleep there, like I do,
it's a tough part.
Then you can have an experience with them. I had an incident last September when, in fact, I was about 100 yards from where I'm sitting right now, in this woods right next to my mother's house where I am right now. I had pre-planted an audio recorder in that woods during the day, and it was programmed to turn on at 10 o'clock. And so I didn't get there till after midnight. I was watching TV or something here, and then I went down there after midnight, and I spread out my blankets and everything, and I lay down and I went to sleep. And at about 1:15, I had a recorder right next to me, in addition to the pre-planted recorder down a little ways below me. And at about 1:15, I wake up to this crunching of sticks about 10 inches from my face. And I went, ah, ah, ah! I was totally startled.
Right.
And I looked, there was this like dark, there was some house lights behind it. So it was kind of backlit, and I had a silhouette right next to me. I didn't smell anything, but it was this thing right 10 inches from my face. And I went, ah, ah, and it turned around and zoomed off on all fours. And I thought it was a baby bear. It seemed like a bear cub. Okay, so cut to the next day when I'm listening to the audio. First, the pre-planted recorder at 11:07, so about an hour before I got there, was a huge chorus of coyotes. And among the coyotes was a low-pitched kind of yell. And also, there was a wood knock in the middle of the coyotes, very clear. And at other points, I've recorded, at other times in other places, I've recorded coyotes in low-pitched yells. I think that the Sasquatch and the coyotes run together. I think they cooperate on hunts. I think the coyotes are like our dogs are. I think they you know, they're kind of like a sled dog team.
Yeah.
They just kind of use what they want. And they probably throw scraps. They probably, you know, take the kill, but then throw scraps to the coyotes like we do with our dogs. Anyway, so I heard this on the recording, and then on my nearby recorder, you can hear me snoring, and you can hear something kind of approaching before I wake up. Going, ah, ah. You can hear it approaching, and then, darn if you don't hear smack, wood knock.
Really?
About a minute before I wake up in terror. So after the wood knock, I'm still snoring, so it didn't wake me up. And my theory is that this young one, and they often are reported to go on all fours, just like human babies go on all fours.
More speed?
Yeah, well, I think they can, when they're that age, go faster on all fours. And so I think, you know, my hunch is that it knocked, it was curious about me, because if you're them, you think about it, you don't have many chances to, like, humans are this kind of like iconic thing that's like the other, you know, like they are to us, like this fascinating thing that you never can get that close to. And if you have a chance to get really close to an incapacitated human and get up close and smell it and see it up close, that must be like a rare opportunity. So I think that it knocked to see if it would wake me up. And when I kept snoring, it took that license. It took that as license to come even closer. And then when I woke up and was startled, it was startled and it ran away. But if it hadn't been for that wood knock a minute before, I would have always thought that it was a bear. Last season, when I slept out for 39 different nights, I was constantly struggling to stay awake and thinking, should I be awake? What am I missing? But then, you know, knowing that snoring is a magnet for them. And so this year, now that I'm going to have those two flares, those thermal cameras going, I can snore in peace. I can snore without any, with a clear conscience.
Yeah, because that night that one came to our camp, Dave was snoring too, and I'm sure I was before I woke up. So probably heard both of us.
They feel like you're incapacitated when you're snoring, and they have free reign, and so it's a good thing.
So how did you end up finding this? Because you show this spot, you're not shy about showing exactly where this is on the map, on the satellite map.
If anyone thinks they're going to drive up here and crash the party, they're just intensely stupid, because, you know, A, you can go where you want, right, close to you, and generate the same situation just through observation, and B, you're not going to get results just by coming with like some kind of aggressive intention or malicious intent.
It's got to be patient.
Yeah, you got to do what I'm doing. You can do it where you are. And how I found the place near my mom's house was that my daughter in the winter would go down to this woods, the same woods that I just referenced, where I had that parent little one come and the wood knock. And she would go down there because there were deer there, and she'd like to look at the deer. And she would go down there. She was about 10 years old at the time. And one day I went with her in the springtime, and I saw these structures. And I said, "Honey, look, look." And she said, "I don't care. Let's look for the deer." So, but I filed that away, and I said, "There are structures. How could it possibly be? This is a micro forest right in the middle of the capital city of Vermont, in Montpelier." And well, so I recorded in there, and I got knocks and vocalizations, and so I knew they come through. I don't know why they come here. Why do they come? I mean, they might be as drawn to us as kindred creatures as we are drawn to them. You know, so I think they get excited. Lots of people find more structures close on the boundaries of human civilization than they do deeper in.
Doug Hijack was saying that too.
Yeah, Doug is all about the edges.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah, he's big on that, and he has a lot of. He helped me see lots of different factors for why this is the case. But one of them is surely just the kinship. They love to watch kids. They love, you know, because they must need stimulation. There's a lot of time on their hands when they're not hunting or mating or hanging out with their families. There's a certain sameness to life in the woods, and I'm sure that they, like we, crave stimulation and interesting things to observe and to learn about different routines of the others that are like them, but also the other side of the coin from them. So, you know, they have more ability to study us than we have to study them, like by 1,000-fold. But I think, you know, I think that's why they set up their structures right next to us, is that they're kind of, it's like in a poker game where you put in a bet and then someone antes up. I think they're anteing up their structures to our structures, and their society exists on the other side of this thin line. So we can capitalize on that if we just realize, I mean, this is one of the paradigm shifts that has been happening in our research community over the last few years, is more and more of us are coming to recognize just how physically close they are to us. You know, many of them probably live way in the wilderness, but many more, or an additional many, not live necessarily, but operate right next to us. They can't live there because they never know when people are going to walk through, but they come there, they come here, they come right down the way from where I'm sitting. You know, so it's recognizing and absorbing this startling truth that is going to allow us to more richly monitor what they're doing and get more and more footage and audio of them. And, you know, eventually there'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back, the camel of resistance that, you know, that we find in mainstream consciousness and in the scientific community, especially.
You have one of the best thermal captures of this creature, don't you? Was that you?
That was a good luck thing, that the woodpile Sasquatch. But, you know, I was kicking myself because I didn't realize what I had until I looked at it later, just like often happens with this, you know. So we were having a bonfire one night, but all I noticed was a little horizontal bar of light or heat. I thought that must be a stone or a piece of metal that had kept the heat from the day, and so I didn't really approach it or keep my camera on it. I kept scanning. When I got home to Vermont and I looked at the footage, I could see that it was an arm, and that this creature was hunkered down behind an old pile of lumber, and it was spying on us through a opening in the pile. You could see its two big eyes.
Yeah.
Luckily, there was a tree right there that the resident of this house measured later. And so by that scale, we could see that the eyes were 4.75 inches apart from midpoint to midpoint, which is more than twice as far as human eyes.
It had its arm around a tree, didn't it?
It had its arm out, and you could see its hand was kind of like, flexing.
Yeah.
you know, once thermal cameras became more affordable back 10 years ago or so, we thought, well, that was going to blow the lid off this whole thing,
Right.
because they're not going to know that we can see them, and we're going to be able to simply like watch them, you know, in the nighttime. But for some reason, I think they hide even in darkness.
Yeah.
They're that hardwired to hide, is that even in pitch darkness, they'll be behind something. So you can't simply, you know, like draw back the curtain and see them like in, you know, daytime. It doesn't work that way. So I think my thermal footage is good. Mike Green's thermal footage is better. And just a couple days ago, this group out of Australia got even better thermal footage, because there's two of them by a stump. And one of them at one point leans down and picks something up. And when it leans down, you can see the clear sagittal crest, a brow ridge, very pronounced brow ridge, and a classic sloping forehead. It goes up to the sagittal crest, you know, like a plane, a flat plane, tilting but flat, you know, up to the sagittal crest.
What about the Sasquatch savant theory? Was that your theory, or did somebody else come up with that?
No, that was mine. I mean, maybe others have thought about it, but I guess, I mean, as far as I know, I was the first to put it in book form and video form. Yeah, over the years, it just struck me that some of what Sasquatch is able to do and their kind of nature seem to resonate with aspects of autism.
Right. Yeah, it explains a lot. The swaying and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, they sway, but that's the least of it. They also, you know, autistic people sometimes will have this thing called echolalia, where they'll repeat what is said to them. And then there's something called delayed echolalia, where they'll hear things, and then like sometime later they'll say it, like a dialogue from a movie, you know, or lyrics from a song. They'll just say them. And, you know, many people report Sasquatch will be in, you know, calling them from the woods in their mother's voice, and they'll think their mother's in the woods, and they'll go out there and not find her and go back to the house, and she'll say, I was here the whole time. So they can mimic our voices and repeat things that we say. And then there's the structures. People with autism often will make, kids especially, will make structures in their room with their toys.
All he wants to do is line things up. No more lining up. Let's color with paper, please. Let me see, make a pretty picture.
Her lining up things of my 4-year-old has gotten pretty extreme. Some classical signs of autism.
Very similarly to how Sasquatch will parallel sticks and make these structures that have all this symmetry to them and this order. Yeah. And with human autistic people, the idea is that they create order against the chaos that they feel kind of encroaching upon them from the world of people and just the world in general. They feel vulnerable to that. So they make structures to kind of create a refuge for themselves. And then when they get older, they'll have kind of more interior structures where they'll like memorize the entire train schedule of London, you know, or the entire, you know, all sorts of memorization. It's called like special interest, an ability to internalize systems, and a sort of a bulwark against chaos by having these structures in their mind that they can repeat and rely on, and they have very routinized behavior. And then there's the whole thing about control. The woman I keep mentioning in Ohio, Snow White Bigfoot, she finds that, you know, I mentioned before that they'll sometimes bring her objects that are similar to the other objects that she has on the railing of her porch, and they'll put them there right in line with the other objects. And this is similar to what kids with autism do with lining up their toys. And it's also similar to what we call OCD, where, you know, it's important that things be right in the right place, you know, and that things be symmetrical and organized. She has this metal bowl, this magnetic metal bowl that she had on the railing, and she would put things in, and they would take them and bring them back 2 weeks later or replace them with something similar. And like dozens of times she would come out in the morning and the bowl would be gone, and she'd go over to her grill. She has this big grill with a hood, and she would lift the hood, and there would be the metal bowl inside.
Wow.
Over and over and over. So it's kind of like they took this notion that no, the bowl belongs over there. No, it belongs over there. It belongs over there every single morning. So I mean, her experiment, and I'm sure hundreds or thousands of people around the world are doing the same kind of thing with their local group. We just don't know about it because they don't diligently chronicle it on YouTube. But it provides a window into the mind of the species and how they are, and they're similar to autistic people, but that's just my theory. You know, there might be other ways to explain it, but you know, it's a window into how very precise and controlled they are, and it's fascinatingly different from the popular notion of them as kind of raging monsters. You know, out of control. They're the opposite. They're the opposite of that. You know, sometimes they can be mad and they can be like monsters, but by and large, it's typically the only way they could have survived alongside us is by being far more controlled than we can imagine. Because if they were just kind of out there in any undisciplined fashion, you know, we would have been able to catch on to them and capitalize on this undiscipline and circumscribed them and dominated them and captured them and all this kind of thing. They have to be absolutely, they have to have a photographic memory, which is another thing that autistic people often seem to have.
Yeah.
And an absolutely high fidelity memory for our human routines and human behavior, so that they can constantly, you know, be in the negative spaces, not the positive spaces, so that we can't draw a bead on them. And women like Angie, is her first name, is Snow White Bigfoot. She has spent the time and the energy and the concentration and the receptive kind of joy to commune with them through objects. You can only, by and large, you can only communicate with them in an indirect mediated fashion, which is also the same as autistic people often. They won't make direct eye contact with you. They will communicate with you only at a slant, you know, indirectly. You can use kind of symbols like cards, or keyboards. Like you can sometimes have breakthroughs with communicating with a profoundly autistic person through using keyboards or symbols on cards, you know, and that's similar to the objects that Snow White Bigfoot uses to communicate with her local group.
The tree knocking and stuff also you mentioned.
Well, I mean, the tree knocking is similar to the stimming that autistic people, it's called stimming, where it's like self-stimulation, which is not in the sexual sense, but in a soothing. They soothe themselves by like they'll flap their hands, which reminds me of my thermal video where she was flexing her hand, and they'll sway and they'll bang on things, and they could relate to Sasquatch knocking, because when you think about it, if Sasquatch were just sitting down and deciding how to behave to most effectively remain unknown to us, they wouldn't make loud percussions in the middle of the night on still nights where we instantly know that they're over there. Seems like they would only do that if they can't help it, because it's part of their hardwired nature to like make sounds and use that nature to communicate with one another. But, you know, you'd think that if they were intent upon pulling the wool over our eyes with 100% effectiveness, they would just use animal sounds to communicate with each other, not banging on trees in a way that no other animal besides us does, therefore giving up the game, you know, giving themselves up by doing this. They would use owl sounds and bird sounds and bug sounds and, you know, chipmunks and all sorts of things that they can mimic. They could communicate that way just as effectively as with knocking. Even over long distances, they could make wolf calls and coyote calls in a certain way that the others would understand. But instead, they bang in a very primitive, kind of crude way that we can instantly pick up on. So why would they do that unless they kind of have to, in a sense, because it releases some sort of energy. In a similar way, I would argue, to how autistic people need to release their energy. Kind of like ground themselves and sort of comfort themselves, you know, by doing that.
Or they just they don't know that we're onto them. Maybe they just bang. They don't think that we have a clue. Maybe.
I would think they would, because a lot of us knock back.
True. That's true.
Increasingly. So you'd think that at least in a local situation where that happened, they would stop doing it, but they don't.
Mm.
So that's kind of some of the oh, and the savant part is that it's not the profoundly disabled autistic people that I'm talking about. It's the autistic savants, the geniuses among the autistic spectrum,
Right.
where they really are just like, they do things that neurotypical people like ourselves can't even approach, can't even hold a candle to. Calculations in their minds and photographic memory. And there's this guy called the human camera that you can look up on YouTube, where he flew over Milan, Italy one time in a helicopter and then went back.
Oh, yeah.
He was able to draw the entire skyline down to the most minute detail.
That's
just
crazy.
From once having flown over it. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think Sasquatch would be able to be so successful at terrain management and evasion if they didn't have a photographic memory of, you know, if we put up a trail camera, even if we try to hide it, it's just it's just like someone took a dump in our living room and notice it right away. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, this is the thing we have to drill into everybody's mind increasingly, is how near they are, how you don't have to go far. You know, people like Todd Standing go deep, deep, deep into the wilderness. You don't have to, no, you don't even have to go one level deep. You just have to go over there.
Yeah.
Over there and look around there, because, you know, for some reason they're right there, just like we're right there for them. Yeah. You know, they were here before we were, so they're probably thinking, why are they so close to us?
Yeah,
they keep thinking, why are they so close to us on the other side? It's like we're mirror images of each other. Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. And if you want to write to me, my email address is nextofkinnextdoor@gmail.com.
Next of kin next door.
Next of kin next door. For Sasquatch are our next of kin here on Earth. That's what I call them, and I don't see any reason not to call them that. You know, we still hear people saying, well, chimpanzees are closest living relative, or hearing people say, well, the only surviving member of the Homo genus is Homo sapiens. Well, that's bunk. It's all bunk.